Well, good evening and welcome to another edition of CrowCast Tuesday Night Live. You're going to have to forgive me, guys, tonight because I'm trying stuff. We've got a new setup, a new look, and it's still pre-season, so I'm clearly still working out the kinks and pressing about 1,000 buttons at once. But luckily, I have a couple of people here to help me. And one of them, as I lose my headset, one of them is Nikki. How you going, Nick?
Oh, I'm doing quite well. So have you mastered the short kicks in the back line yet?
I've never mastered short kicks in the back line, unfortunately. So never mind. And Pete, how you going, Pete?
I'm good, mate, and never fear. It's only pre-season, as you say. You've got plenty of time to iron out the kinks and get your game plan in order for round one.
That's exactly right, mate. So sit back and enjoy, particularly those people that are watching us on YouTube or Facebook. Enjoy my panicked look on my face as I madly try and get bloody screens going. Anyway, Pete, Nikki, did you catch the games on the weekend?
Did indeed.
And I did as well. So, yes, I can. I'm able to talk. I didn't see the ladies' game. I'm sure Nikki did. So I guess I saw the under-23s, if that's where you want to start, Finn.
Yeah, why don't we start with the under-23s, eh?
Yeah, I thought it wasn't a bad hit out for the guys. I thought that both teams had some good quality missing, probably Port more so than us. But overall, a reasonable hit out. Not great in the first half, but there were some really good signs from a few of the young kids in the second half. Interestingly enough, and I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, I felt that the positive stuff that I took away from that game related more to the more recent draftees. The guys that have been there a couple of years, not so much. So I guess I was particularly impressed with some of the class of 2019. But, gee, I tell you what, that 2016 draft, it is...
it's a dog, isn't it? It really
just
is.
Starting to look more and more like... And you all know I've been on the Elliot Himmelberg train for a long time, and I really thought that this was his year to come on. I thought that, a few games last year just to, give him a taste, and I thought that he was developing nicely and just feel like he's just hit a bit of a brick wall at the moment.
Yeah, agreed.
So he's a major concern. Benny Davis, I've just had a gut feeling that Ben is closer than what we might all think to getting a few games at the start of this year. I just feel like that Nix has been talking about him a lot, and he lined up in that first trial, and I was just expecting a little bit more from him in this match against the under-23s. And so it'll be interesting to see whether he holds his place for the upcoming trial. I'm not sure that they'll play him for 3.
I think he might be a chance, Pete. I think there's a lot of faith being put in him. He has been talked up a bit for a lot of his defensive work that he's been doing, which is something that he's had to, I think, work on in the SANFL a bit as well. And in the modern game, you've got to have forwards who can do that. And he's got a nice bag of tricks, as you and I both have been trying to sprout for a while. But what I've really liked is they've played him where he's need to been played. So when he went into the AFL side for that first Marsh Cup game, he was actually played as a forward. And they left him there and they let him play that natural game. And there were a couple of little signs there. I thought there was some signs again as well on the weekend, the under-23 game. There were some issues with delivery from the midfield, and unfortunately as a forward that's going to limit you. But in contrast,
it's just flashes with Ben, isn't it?
Yeah, but you look at what I'm really impressed with Ben Crocker. Really like the look of him.
I like Crocker as well, actually. I thought initially he looked a bit shaky, made a couple of blues, but he's just seems to be one of those guys that has an innate ability to find a bit of space and create a bit of space for himself, and he plays in front and attacks the ball.
Leads at the ball carrier.
Yeah.
Makes them kick to him on a lead.
Yeah, I actually
I think he's really going to get games.
Well, I actually wonder whether he might end up being that third sort of medium forward option. He might end up going ahead of Davis and McAdam, I reckon.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
He plays with more intent, doesn't he?
Yeah, just a bit. Ben Davis, there's so much there. There's so much in that package, but we only see flashes of it. And but I'm with you, Nicky. As I said at the start, I just got a funny feeling he's just been talked up a bit in this pre-season. So I've got a funny feeling he's close. But you're right, Fanny. I mean, Crocker might have overtaken him. Yeah,
well, maybe not yet, but I reckon the other one I reckon is going to get overtaken is Elliot Himmelberg. I can see quite clearly, and I know you're not a fan, Pete, but I can see quite clearly why we got Billy Frampton on board, because Elliot, I think, has plateaued at the moment.
Yeah, I think he has, and I think that I've felt that this pre-season it's been a bit of a nil-all draw between those two. Neither of them has really put their hand up, and I'd be quite happy for neither of them to be playing in round one. I'm not quite sure whether they'll have the courage to go away from that structure that we've had for so long.
We need a second ruck, Pete. That's the problem.
Yeah, do we?
Well,
do we really?
Well, we need a chop out. Whether they decide to use someone else as a chop out and just basically give it away, I don't know. But they needed some sort of a chop out.
Yeah, I just wonder whether they can find that within the squad. Within the guys that they've got, because I just feel that neither of those two have said pick me. But it's a very very it's a structure that they've been in love with for a long time.
Yeah,
and that's probably due to the personnel that we've had. But geez, who of us could forget Sean Grigg being the backup ruck in the
Trent Orban-Allen.
It's 2017 Richmond Grand Final team.
Two dads. That's what I call him.
I just think that if you've got the player, if you've got the personnel to say, right, this is the structure that we should have. But if you haven't got the player, then you just work another structure around it. And we've always just had Jenkins.
Think so. Yeah. Just briefly too, people on Spreaker Chat, thanks for joining us. Just give me a thumbs up on the audio levels. As I said, I've been messing around with stuff over the last couple of weeks, and I think the levels are pretty even. But it's always been a bit of a bugbear of people that are listening that the levels can sometimes be a bit out of whack. So if we're a bit out of whack, just let me know in the chat and I'll balance it up.
What was really nice on the Saturday was the performances of particularly three of the draftees that from last year that I really, really liked. And of course, Harry Schomburg was one who had a couple of really lovely bits of play, and I thought Lockie Gallant was just terrific. He just showed some real intent. A lot's been made of his size, but it is what it is. He still plays good football.
Yeah,
and he still loves to tackle.
He loves to get in.
He doesn't care that he's getting it. He's still going to try and take players down.
And I thought Ronan O'Connor had some good moments in the midfield as well.
Yes,
just looked to me like he could be something. So I felt more buoyed by the 2019 draftee class more than anything. Obviously Darcy Fogarty looked good.
It does beg the question that, and there was a bit of discussion on, I think, Big Footy during the week with regards to the various draft classes and Hamish Ogilvy's success rate. And when you think about it, you remove Darcy from the equation because he pretty much picked himself. But Hamish has had a pretty lean year during that 2016 to 2018 period, really. And probably since, he picked up Tom, but probably apart from Tom, there hasn't been much in that sort of 16 to 18 pool. Would you agree?
No, Hamill and Scholl are quite nice.
Well, they haven't played an AFL game yet.
Well, yeah, so it's hard.
But that's not their fault.
Well, and that actually is a good. I'm glad you raised that, Nikki, because it then becomes a discussion about at what point do you lay the blame at Hamish, or what, or do you blame the selection policy where we've still got who running around, and after the game, and he was another one. Actually, he had a decent game on the weekend and played some good football last year. He's a top 30. Was he drafted 30 or just before? In a great draft.
Yeah.
And he's now in his second year. Now he should be playing.
Yeah.
This weekend. He should be playing Friday. And I tell you what, if they're running DMAC around in round one, when you've got Hamill wasting away in the reserves, well, you'd tear your hair out if you're Hamish, really, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a very good point, Peter. As a recruiter, all you can do is put the players in the squad, and then it's up to the coaching staff to play them. And I reckon you would get a bit despondent after a while, to be honest. If you're picking good kids and you knew their potential and their worth, and then you just saw them stagnate. And nothing against David McKay, but let's be honest, he hasn't really been the answer for the last 4 or 5 years, and we need to move on from him. It's not as if we haven't got other kids that can play in that spot.
So we've got exciting talent there, but you've got to play him.
I was just going to say, and the fact that we're looking at moving Miller and Moore through the midfield from half back, we're definitely going to see a lot more of Smith. There's the opportunity for these guys to come in and replace him. And by the look of it, and as much as I love Bull, Jake Kelly,
here's another one.
He was quite a liability on the weekend. I think those guys, there's an opportunity there to take those chances, and you can see that there's some pressure being put on. That we've already heard that Mackessy's going to play on Friday.
Yep.
But I actually thought did well in spite of the fact that the umpire didn't know what the rules were to do with Mitch Brown. And that kid's still a rookie.
Oh, I think Butts has definitely got some potential. I like the look of him. I know, Pete, you've liked him for a while.
Yeah, we've liked him, haven't we, Pete?
Absolutely. Look, we've loved the current sort of, if you want to put it in inverted commas, the current Sample team.
Yeah,
it's a real, and look, what did they make a prelim final last year?
They did, and they should have bloody won.
And we've talked, and we talked about this ad nauseum last year, that they were a side that actually were on top of the ladder, and it was actually when they started rotating a few, guys that were being dropped from the seniors, that it just unbalanced them a little bit. When they were just playing, and then they pulled the season around. So there was a lot of good players in that Sandford team that were playing really good football against men, and but they just need their chance.
All I'll say is the one disappointment for me out of those guys is McHenry. I think he's still a little bit shaken from the injuries and things he had last year, which is a bit of a surprise to me because leading up to there, he was absolute gangbusters in the SNFL. Then he got his back injury, and I know there were a few others that the club didn't report. But he's come back. He's done most of the preseason, still been managed. But that Melbourne game, he looked like a deer in the headlights. He lost at that level, and he didn't quite have it at the under-23 game. So he's one I do. Yeah, he's one I really like, but he just didn't look right yet.
I know Ned's a bit of a fan favourite, even though he hasn't played yet. But when you look at what was taken around that pick in that draft, and given the fact that we had already we drafted let's face it, a smallish midfielder in Chase. In retrospect, do you think Ned was the right pick? I'm starting to doubt his ability to step up.
Look, I can only assess him on what I saw and what Nicky was referring to pre-injury, and I saw him. I saw him take Central to the cleaners at Elizabeth. I saw him take Norwood to the cleaners in the bog on a Friday night in the wet. Genuinely take these teams to the cleaners in clearances around the midfield. Then he gets his injury. Now, if it was just a back injury or whether there was other thing, I don't know.
There was other things.
I think that there's a lot around Ned McHenry that we don't know.
Where do we play him?
And he should start off as a small forward, but moving through the midfield. He's a midfielder.
And see, therein lies the problem, I think. We've got a lot of small forwards, and probably a couple ahead of him. Like Stengel looks like he's the ready-made replacement for Eddie.
Yep.
So he gets first run. Chase has been played a little bit as a small forward.
But I don't think that's happening with him under Nix.
Well, I hope not. I hope they just play him where he was picked to, drafted to play, and that's in the midfield. So I don't know.
I think Murphy's the one.
Yeah, Murphy's the other one. And see, Murphy and McHenry are very similar.
They are, but Ned's got that little bit more class, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so, Nick.
I haven't seen the class at the level yet.
Not at AFL level, no, definitely
not.
Yet. I think that we just need to reserve judgment until he's fit.
Yeah.
I just don't think he's fit.
Yeah, and that's a fair call. That's a fair call. And you guys have seen a lot more of him at SANFL level than I have. But the couple of games that the bit that I've seen him play at the level, he hasn't had the pace of it at all, and that's really surprised me, actually. And he's one of these frenetic players, high energy, lots of energy around the ball, which is fantastic. But given where he was taken in the draft, and given who went around him, and the one that springs to mind is Dersma.
Yep.
Did we make the right call at that pick? I'm not quite sure.
And I think that's fair comment as well, because he's in his second year, and it was, inverted commas, a super draft, and as you say, there's a lot of good players around. So, yep, it's certainly a question mark over. And also, we need to see Chase step up this year as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we need to, see something from those guys for sure. Because, as you said, as we said at the start, the biggest disappointment for me this whole pre-season is Jordan Gallucci.
Oh, goodness me!
Tremendously disappointing that he can't even get himself up for a trial game, and so that's just I don't know what's going on there, but there's obviously something a bit deeper that we're not saying, and
I'm starting to worry, Pete, about Jordan.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a massive worry.
Mm.
But if his head's not in the game, and if he can't get that consistency up, which we need, which Godden didn't allude to, he flat out said what it is. And you know what? I'm actually trusting a coach who comes out and says that he knows the player and knows that that's what they need.
Yeah.
And I quite liked that because, and that's the hard thing about coaching that a lot of people kind of don't understand, because they've only experienced those old school footy coaches who yells at everyone. Is that you really do need to understand what motivates each and every player. And I hope we can actually see the best out of Jordan, because he's got a hell of a lot of talent there and some really nice tricks that, we saw from that Carlton game, 2 years ago, where he finally got played in the midfield and he was outstanding. Yes, it was against Carlton at that stage. And it's just so frustrating.
I reckon at his best and getting enough of the ball, he actually plays a lot like Jason Ackermanis. But at his worst, I think he is a poor man's Richard Douglas. I'm talking about Dougie's last couple of years, where I'm not really a fan of Richard Douglas. He's a 15 possession midfielder, and very hot and cold, in and out, and that's where I think that Jordan could end up if he doesn't apply himself. But I think if he applies himself, he's got enough pace. He's got a low centre of gravity like Ackermanis had. He's got good foot skills. And he's just got a little bit of mongrel about him. He straight lines the ball and hits the ball hard and hits the contest hard. So I think at his best, he's Acker. Or, plays like Acker. Ackermanis was pretty unique. But at his worst, I think he's a 10 to 15 possession midfielder. And for a first-round draft pick, again, that's very disappointing.
And we've got enough of them.
The game that I go back to with Jordan Gallucci is last year against Melbourne, up in the Territory. Now, he only had, I reckon, 11 or 12 possessions.
Yeah.
But his influence on the game was enormous.
Yeah.
Absolutely enormous. Now, I can't think of it off the top of my head now, but I know that I've done the analysis previously. if you looked at his statistical data from that game, what he did with his 12-odd possessions, it was ridiculous. Almost every possession was either an inside 50, a goal assist, or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Like, he has the capacity
Absolutely,
to
Peter.
hugely influence games of football.
Yeah.
He has that ability. And, you know, in that frame of mind, I'd take 20 possessions from Jordan opposed to most other players.
100%.
Getting, you know, like a Matt Crouch, 45 possessions with
100%.
43 handballs.
Well, there's another player we've got missing that's also that small forward role who's injured is Riley Knight, and that's our issue with Riley, is that he can't get over the 20 possessions.
No.
And yet you look at the contrast of the hurt factor that Gooch can do with 20 possessions, you don't get that same hurt factor from Riley.
No. Unfortunately, I think Riley was actually done a disservice when they started using him with run-with roles. And I understand why they started using him that way, because he's fairly tenacious. But I think it was also a means to get him following good players to start running better patterns. But unfortunately, a combination of injury and just a lack of him coming on. Like I don't think we've seen Riley Knight play what you would call a quote unquote breakout game as a genuine midfielder. And if he's not a genuine midfielder that can get 20 quality possessions a week, then what is he? You know, there's no other spot for Riley. And now that he's had that injury, I don't know whether he fits anymore in our best 22 or probably even in our best 25, to be honest.
Just as we're pushing up to half an hour already, so did you want to move on to... Sorry to chop that, but I know that we're trying to chop the time.
22 minutes, Pete.
It's only 22.
I've got the timer right here in front of me.
I was worried that we need to give Nikki some clear air for the AFLW. But
oh no, she gets 30 minutes.
That could be painful.
Hey, now,
okay. Just quickly looking forward to Gold Coast then.
Yeah.
How do you think that's going to shape up?
Oh well, who knows? Who knows?
Because
really?
Gold Coast smashed Geelong, and Geelong didn't have a small side or their lower talent. They had their talent up there, but Gold Coast wanted to win.
I've never actually thought Gold Coast were as bad as what their ladder position makes them out to be.
Same. I've always really liked the way they played.
A couple of years ago, I thought they were actually on the improve, on the up and up, and then they fell in a massive hole. And I think a lot of that was actually caused by the structure of the club and certain key personnel, and they never really recovered from losing Ablett and bits and pieces like that. But I still think that with a good coach, and by all reports, Jew was a good coach, he's had that group now for a little while. They were able to retain some key players, like the fact that Gold Coast were able to retain Lukosius and what's his name, the other South Aussie
King.
Rankin.
King. Yeah, and obviously King as well. I mean, that says something to me about the organisation. And everyone's got them as cellar dwellers this year. I don't think they're actually going to be the pushover that people are rating them. And I think they'll be a real test for us in round one.
Yeah,
real test.
Calling them cellar dwellers, and I know that's not you. I know that it's the media out there. It's just lazy journalism.
I agree. I agree. They're not that. They've got too much quality in that team. And as I said, I think the key is now Drew's been able to basically pull apart what they've been doing and regroup them and get some good system into their play. I don't think they're easy beats at all. And I think what we've seen from the Crows at the moment, Matthew Nix is obviously very keen to instill his brand of football, and it's different in some respects to what we've seen the Crows play over the last 3 or 4 years. You add in some new talent into the team, some young kids who are finding their feet and, probably need to find some composure and all that sort of stuff. put in a new game plan that, in some respects, I mean, the short kicking out of defence requires not only precision in terms of disposal, but also something that we've lacked in a key area, and that's work rate. We don't work hard enough to not only make space for a lead, but also to clear space behind the lead. You know, so I think there's lots of challenges for the squad, lots of challenges for Nix, and I don't think we've seen us play anywhere near what his blueprint would be, and I think it's going to be more than just a couple of weeks. I think it's going to be a lot of this season.
Yep.
And I'm actually fine with that because Season talked about the fact that they've had to learn a new way to defend.
Yeah.
They've had to learn a new way to move the ball. So we're going to see us leak goals, unfortunately. We're going to see those quality players that we know are good defenders are going to get caught out. It's going to happen. So people have to be patient regarding it. But the couple of times we saw in the Marsh game and the under-23 game, when we could get those short kicks working fast and then we move that ball down the ground, that's some really good-looking football that was happening. So there's going to be little glimpses like that. But you know what? A lot of us have lived through the Robert Shaw years. We can do it again.
Yeah, completely different. We've said it before on this podcast, you know, this year for us is all about watching kids develop and watching the game plan develop and all that. And anyone that gets upset this year about poor results is their expectations need an adjustment, because it's whatever we get out of it, the main thing that we're going to get out of it is 22 games into our next core group of players that hopefully take us back into finals contention.
Yeah, when that's what the only thing that will annoy people is if that's not what we see, and if we see
exactly,
and actually a tweet that Andrew Fagan released, I think it was today, was just a little bit concerning about, you know, that we'll get back to playing, you know, what we want to see is, you know, exciting what Crows fans want to see is exciting football and our team playing finals. And I thought that just rang, I don't know. What I want to see is what you just described and set out, Fane. I want to see, you know, I want to see youth. I want to see mistakes being made. I want to see kids that lack composure. I want to see all those. That's what I want to be looking for.
Yeah.
I don't want to see us, you know, playing, you know, older players and clinging on by our fingernails, trying to grab eighth spot.
Do you reckon he's? I think one of the things that the review showed was the fact that Andrew really wasn't. He was far more concerned with memberships and bums on seats and engagement and all the rest of it. And it makes you wonder whether a comment like that from Andrew is more about, you know, just engaging the fans. I don't think we've heard anything from anyone involved in the coaching side or the player development side that suggests that we're going to have a quick dead cat bounce, and that's what they're expecting. Yeah. And I think
that's a fair comment.
If you listen to what Nix has been saying, he keeps reiterating, stick with us. You're going to see kids. You're going to see some exciting stuff. Yep. There's going to be ups and downs, but stick with us. Yeah. So he's already tempering that.
Yeah.
And the fact that he played butts in the first Marsh game, and he's already said he's only playing 22 for this Friday.
I really like big butts.
Like rehearsal. Waiting for you to pull that one out. And Mackessy's going to play this game. You know, we've already seen him put Paholke in the guts and leave him in the guts. He did that with Jones. I think we're going to see what we wanted. I think we're going to get that from Nix, and as long as those above him don't panic, as soon as people start complaining, and they're going to complain and they're going to be loud and they're going to be the loudest voices on AA, but who really gives a shit about those ones, because it's the same people over and over again.
Well, the thing is, I think
he can stick to his guns.
We've been banging on for what, probably 18 months on this podcast about the need for change. We've got change now. It'll be hypocritical of us now to bloody sit back and bag them, you know. And
couldn't agree more.
The same with blokes like Stephen Rowan, 5AA, and those blokes that were also in their own way banging on for change. we now need to embrace it. And, I hate to use the phrase, but we now need to back the club in. The club has actually done everything that we've asked for over the last 6 months. There's been an admin clean out, there's been a review, there's been a turnover of the list. Everything that we've asked for, they've done, which makes it quite obvious, Peter, that we're completely right. It's vindication, but also we now need to get behind the club. I think the Adelaide media need to get behind the club. You're going to have the trolls like Kane Corns who are going to have little snipes now and again, but I think blokes on 5AA, blokes on Triple M, Jarman and all the rest of it. We actually need to assess what we're looking at now rather than have these expectations and, as you say, the cheap journalism, Peter, about, we're not making finals, blah, 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 blah. We need to back this new squad in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm I think we're all just, ultra keen to see kids like, Will Hamill and, those of us who followed the Sandful last year and followed the progress of those kids were just ultra keen to see those kids playing.
Yeah. And DSG, we are interactive, so thanks to everyone on Spreaker for joining in. Obviously, there's also live chat on YouTube and Facebook. I don't know whether it's coming through on my little chat streamer there, but nonetheless, have your say. DSG on the chat says, if in the pursuit of change they stayed in the same path, have they changed? Well, that's the key, isn't it? That's what we're looking for, Peter, isn't it? If they give DMAC 22 games, if they pick a senior bloke instead of a junior kid, if they play Fog in defence in the twos, if we see that sort of stuff, then you could argue that, nothing's really changed. But
Fog shouldn't be in the twos.
Of course not. I've found Jason Dunstall's comments and also Matthew Pavlich's comments over the pre-season when they've had the opportunity, and they haven't said anything directly, but you can tell by their words that they've got an insight into the footy club now, and I've been particularly interested in some of the little comments that they've said about junior development and opportunity. So hopefully, that is now, and I think it's going to be a change for the club that's going to take a while, because I think there's some fairly entrenched practices, and I hope one of the things when you do a review, and Pete, you'd know this, and Nikki probably too, one of the things you do when you review is you revisit your results in 2 months' time, 3 months' time, 6 months' time, to make sure that the outcomes that you've actually identified and put in place, make sure you're tracking on those. And I hope that they've got the mechanisms in place, whether it's a flyby by Dunstall or whether it's an internal mechanism, to make sure that what they learnt through this review and what they decided to implement, they're actually tracking on. Otherwise, it's very easy as a corporation or a culture to slip back into old habits. So, all right, a bit of AFL news before we get onto the AFLW, Nick. And one thing that I was really interested in seeing, Peter, and I don't know whether you picked this up, Patrick bloody Dangerfield standing next to, I think it was Cochin and Hardwick during the anthems at the quote-unquote State of Origin game, mimicking the power stance. Did you happen to catch that?
Oh, yes.
I saw a photo later.
I saw a photo of it. Well, I saw a photo of it. So, and I was going to tweet Paddy, but then I thought, why? But there's a couple of things about that. First of all, if that doesn't put a bit of a fire in the belly to Adelaide players, not so much what Danger was doing, but Cochin and Hardwick's reaction to what Danger was doing, that needs to really light a bit of a fire. But more importantly for Dangerfield, I feel sorry for him, because clearly that's the only chance he's going to get to do anything like that, because he wasn't there on 2017 Grand Final day doing a power stance, was he? He wasn't. Where was he? He was.
No. He was opposite that happening to him. They got their asses kicked.
He was at Moggs Creek while we were standing on the MCG on Grand Final day. And let's be honest, if Patrick Dangerfield was standing in that line on grand final day doing a power stance, things might have been a bit different. So Paddy can sit there and laugh, but by taking the money and run to the back to Mummy in Moggs Creek, he might have cost himself the opportunity to stand on the MCG on grand final day and do a power stance and then stitch up Richmond and be a premiership player instead of just being a Brownlow medalist at Geelong whose fortunes are fading fast.
Well, they're on the edge of a cliff, Geelong, and I think they're gone. I think that sorry to sidetrack, but the last kick in the guts for them was Kelly going. That was just massive for them. They are cooked. And Dangerfield now, he will not be a premiership player, and I'd be very, very surprised if he even gets to another prelim, to be honest.
It was quite amusing, though, during that telecast when they did talk to him on the bench, and they asked him a question where they wanted him to say how he was so excited about playing with Martin, Bontempelli or whatever, as to, who he was most looking forward to play with. And he said, Sloaney, I just want to play with, my mates again. And you could actually hear the deflation in the interview, just like, I wasn't expecting that because Sloane's not a star. But if you actually watch that game, the amount of time Sloane and Walker were involved in scoring opportunities with clever handballs, and what they were doing was very, very interesting. And the other thing that I thought was also very interesting was how far Betts has fallen. He's just not up to it. Just showed.
I think the jury's out on that, Nick. I think the jury's out on that simply because that was possibly the most ridiculous game under the State of Origin banner I have ever witnessed. Yeah. I mean, you can't send a team of players who represent the rest out on a field with a white Guernsey with a gold bloody emblem. Like, it was they look, I mean, at least give them a Guernsey that looks powerful, for God's sakes. I mean, they're up against the Big V, and they're coming out in a cricket bloody Guernsey, for God's sakes. They look terrible. There was no pressure on the game. People are using it as a yardstick to future Origin. It's got nothing to do with Origin. No. That was an exhibition game. It should be called All Stars.
Just an exhibition.
It should be called All Stars. It shouldn't be called Origin.
Yeah, which is what it should have been called. It was done for a good reason.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was some really nice football being played. It was, that ball was zinging around. You did see some of the best players. I did love the fact, though, that they quite literally, with Brody Grundy in the ruck, they were almost unstoppable when that was happening. And that was surprising, the commentators. And I think everybody else there going, hang on, so other people are actually better than Victoria?
Nick, you're reading into A4W time.
Yeah. I don't have a lot to say about them after that performance.
Look, the other funny thing that came out of that exhibition game was David King, the idiot, and it's the first time I've agreed with Kane Cornsford. David King's come out and said, well, it was so good to see really good players fresh at the end of the game, and because of the unlimited interchange. Players were fresh and we need to bring that back in and yada, yada, yada. What an idiot. First of all, it was an exhibition game. Second of all, the reason why we've brought fatigue into the game of football is actually to stop the ability for players to flood and for grounds to become congested, because obviously fatigue means that the game actually opens up, David, and you're not going to get that free-flowing football. You've only had to look at the football for the last 5 years to understand that the reason we've put a cap back in is to try and stop that full press, that full ground press. What an idiot. The guy's an analyst, and he said something like that after watching an exhibition game where no one wanted to touch anyone else.
Agreed.
Sorry, my headset just fell out. So anyway,
You're doing well with the headset tonight.
because I'm not using headphones, I'm using a little bud thing. All right. Anyway, enough of that. That was silly. Anything else in the AFL before we move on to the women?
Nope.
I think that's it. Give us some women's news, Nikki. It was a bit of a disappointment.
Yes and no. I actually didn't expect us to win, because I think of where we're at the moment. We'd come back from Geelong. We had a game which was quite a tough game against Geelong, and pretty much in that third quarter, watching the game, being there live, it's like we're tired. We're just even the third quarter, Marinoff could only jog after a player. She couldn't run. I did think she actually spent most of the week in Melbourne. She actually wasn't training, so I wonder what was whether that was compounding it a little bit. But the whole team looked pretty tired as well. We lost Jess Foley in the second quarter. That then hampered our ruck rotations. It meant Ree Metcalf, in her first game back at this level, had to play more in the ruck than what she was going to. We had to then push Hatchard and Bedell, young Chelsea Bedell, into the ruck. She didn't do too badly, but it just looked too tired. And the game plan that Clarkey instigated to have a loose player in defence, our defenders were confused as to who was supposed to be the loose player. That's how Carlton were able to get those free players. They worked it around better than what we were trying to do. So if anybody's looking at it saying particular defenders had bad games, it was partly that setup they were being made to play, which was causing some of the confusion. I think he should have just stuck Sarah Allen on Harris and left it at that instead of trying to get her to be played loose in front of her. Sarah doesn't do loose player. She plays best when she's got somebody to man up on and to follow and to counteract. And when she was one-on-one with her, you saw her comfortably beat Harris. So that's an issue I kind of had with that. You could see the players getting tired, and he kept sticking to that loose player in defence, which meant they had a loose player. They were fitter. They were using it better. If he'd just gone back to one-on-one in that last quarter, I think it might have been a slightly different result, even with how fatigued we were getting, because Carlton don't have long kicks. They can only do short kicks. So as soon as you allow them to have a loose player, they can bring that short kicking game in. If you're on them and there's always an opponent, then you can get the pressure on them. They don't handle pressure that well at times. So I think we lost it with players being tired. I didn't like Maddie Newman being dropped. I didn't think she should have been dropped. So I thought there was some issues with selection, but it was fabulous to see Erin back. It was even better to see the Beast back in Ree Metcalf. And so those players will be better for the run, but we've got a really hard game coming up against North down in Hobart this week.
We're not contending this year, are we, Nick? I think that's pretty clear.
No, well, actually, we can still make finals.
I know. No. That's not what I said, though.
I don't know, because I don't think there really is a team that's a standout.
Oh, North have been going pretty well.
So much to me. No, you didn't see them on the weekend. Gold Coast nearly had them. Gold Coast at Arden Street nearly had them. So North, I don't think. I think everybody's actually around the mark. I think it's almost anybody's competition, and unfortunately, the number of ACLs that are compounding, and we've had other ones on the weekend with Brazil, etc.
Look, that's starting to become an issue. That's something that's starting to become an issue that the AFL need to address, in my opinion. They
are actually collecting data. There is, I think, somebody who's I think, outside of there as well, who is doing a lot of that data collection as well on it. And their contrast, I think they're actually looking at the numbers in terms of the VFLW as well, because I think a lot of the argument is on the right track of the time of year we're playing it on grounds that are hard, a shorter preseason as opposed to winter with a longer preseason that you have leading into that competition, softer grounds, which a lot more people have played on. So for the simple, like we're playing at Richmond Oval, and I know that West Adelaide are actually banned from training on the Oval for certain times in order to keep it ready to go for the AFLW games.
Yeah.
So I think there's some very good information that will be collated out of it. Yes, women in a lot of sports do seem to have a preponderance of knee injuries, but I also think you need to look at the types of sports they are, where they're being played. So for netball, it's on a hard surface. It's a lot of short turning, and a lot of those players do ankle injuries. They then do like quite heavy strapping on the ankles. Now, if you've got your ankle strapped, where's the force if you get a side-on force, and if it can't be impacted in that ankle because of there, it's going to go up to the next joint, which is the knee, which really doesn't go sideways. I think there's a number of factors, but it is actually being looked at.
Yeah, it's almost as concerning, and I don't want to downplay the concussion issue, but it's almost as concerning as the concussion issue in the context of women's footy, because it could be a physiological thing, Nick, in terms of the way the women have to train in order to strengthen that area of their bodies. Lots of research required, but you hate to see the amount of ACLs.
And clubs.
I think that
clubs are doing a lot of work around it.
I also think there's a case with the women, if they continue. There's a case for actually having a look at their boots, and actually sacrificing a little bit of grip in order to
on that.
Yeah, and remember the time, Nikki.
Yes, just on that. I've got a new pair of footy boots this year, which is ASICS have been working with the Australian Physiotherapy Association.
Yeah.
They've redesigned football boots for women.
Yeah.
So the heel's actually raised. They are incredibly light. And when I put them on...
High heels playing footy, that's a bit stereotypical, isn't it?
No, it's because of the impact of the lower leg injuries.
Yep.
Raising the heel up actually decreases the low. So it's not a full high heel. It's just slightly
I
raised,
understand
but it
what
is
you
a bit different.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more research that's been done into footy boots. So there's all this stuff is kind of happening. It's going to take a couple of years before we see, hopefully, results come out, more things being found out about. And another thing which also needs to be touched on with female athletes is menstruation.
Yeah.
So that does affect as well. And so somebody else reported, I think, like the Brisbane players, they've been recording data of all their players regarding it and things like that. And a lot of other clubs, I think, will be doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's horrible now, but I think that there is attention on it, but it's going to take time to get that data, to get the results. And
so
we see.
Next week we've got North, or this week coming up we've got North,
North
over
on
there.
Saturday down at Hobart.
Oh, Hobart! Holy crap!
Yeah.
Is it? That's the first women's game in Hobart, is it?
I think it
is. In Tassie? Or, in terms of the AFLW, anyway. Did they?
I think they might have gone there last year.
Anyway, so that's going to be another challenge for the ladies. So I don't know. To me, it just seems like we're a combination of a little bit off the boil. We've had some injuries. Obviously, we had a couple of key ins last week, but they'll be underdone. And you'd argue that maybe not enough time in the season for them to get back to full match fitness. So it's going to be a big challenge for the women's team to back up again. But one thing that we do know is that they're always up for a fight, the ladies. So I guess
indeed.
I guess discard them at your peril. Look, that's all we got time for, guys. Thank you to everyone that's on the chat, on Spreaker, on Facebook, on YouTube. Apologise if it's seemed a little bit stilted. It's still pre-season, and we are going for a bit of a new look this year. So
it's those short kicks through the back line.
It is. It's short kicks, and I've missed a few targets tonight, Nikki, I've got to say. But unlike the Crows team, you guys have run really hard to cover me, so thank you for that. Thank you, Peter.
All good, mate. Good to catch up.
That's right. Obviously, the men are playing Gold Coast on Friday night in the last of the March series.
No, Friday afternoon at 4:20.
Yep, 4:20.
Can we say how stupid the AFL are for that?
I don't understand. Why? Don't they want anyone to turn up? Yeah, it's a game against Gold Coast, don't they? Like, there'll be 9 people there. Obviously, and then we got the rest until the season proper starts. We will obviously be returning with a rev up before round 1, and obviously the wrap show as well on Sundays at the conclusion of round 1 as well. So stick with us. Leave us comments if you've got some ideas or some comments about our presentation or our look. If you want to see something on a Tuesday night, we're trying to make this one quick fire and interactive and leave all the analysis for the Sunday and Thursday show or rev up shows. Pete, I think we did it right. We got to, 51 minutes? Not too bad considering we're covering the AFLW as well.
No, fair enough. Good stuff, mate.
One thing that I did do, Peter, I forgot to do outro music, so we haven't got any outro music. So, that's it. Thanks.
Cheers, guys.
We'll see you all next week.
Bye.
Night all.